The American myth goes something like this. A small group of noble and divinely wise men of selflessness believed in equality and a government by the people and for the people. They heroically established an unprecedented system of democracy that guaranteed freedom and equality to all Americans for all time. Unfortunately, every word of that myth is entirely untrue. In fact, the exact opposite is true. The only praise those men deserve is their advanced ability to deceive. They did this by denouncing certain behaviors in public and eagerly engaging in those behaviors once they stepped down from the pulpit. They were men who, for the most part, inherited their wealth. Samuel Adams was born to a Boston wealthy malt merchant. John Hancock was adopted by his childless uncle, the richest merchant in New England. Hancock eventually took over his uncle's firm, making him the wealthiest man in the country for some time. James Madison was the son of a wealthy planter. George Washington married the wealthiest widow in America. Robert Morris was a tobacco plantation owner who, as America's first billionaire, financed the Revolution. Thomas Jefferson's hobby was buying the most expensive art in the world to furnish the most lavish property in the New World, Monticello. The founding fathers of America were comprised of the wealthiest men in America. Their interest in forming the new government was to preserve their ability to sustain and increase that wealth, most often through the hard work of poor citizens. None of the founding fathers ever professed to support democracy. The word democracy cannot be found anywhere in our founding documents. Each did profess to support the power of the wealthy minority against the power of the majority. John Adams clearly let it be known that he was against the thought of poor people, blacks, or women voting. They worried about democracy and believed it was a bad form of government. Their shared thought was that if everyone was allowed to participate, it would lead to a demagogue. The people who would come into power would appeal to the frenzy of the masses. In fact, only white men above a certain property ownership threshold were allowed to vote. It was only after the 1913 ratification of the 17th Amendment to the Constitution that U.S. senators were elected by direct popular vote. For those men who laid down the rules for American government, it was their greed that drove their motives, nothing else. All being opposed to the direct participation of a large group of people in the political process, they developed constraints that they wrote into the Constitution, making sure that the average citizen's rights were very limited. They were not stupid men, however. They were fully aware that within the process, there must be careful effort to deceive the American people into believing that the exact opposite of their true intentions were the basis of their considerations. As American politicians, many had already acquired skill at deceiving the masses. Washington, Madison, and Jefferson had all given convincing speeches condemning slavery, yet each practiced slavery without constraint. They used the very same skill in crafting the Constitution, hoping that their hypocrisy would be undiscovered by the uneducated masses. This included the very first words of the written document, "We the people," a statement that is a blatant lie itself. Evidence of this is in the fact that they assigned themselves as architects of the new government, even conducting the construction of the government in complete secrecy. There is no stretch of the imagination that could reasonably conclude that the people, who the laws were designed to govern, had anything at all to do with the process, or that their input was even sought to any measure. The framers of the Constitution saw to it that only one part of the branch of federal government, the House of Representatives, would be elected by the people. The Electoral College chose the president, the Commander-in-Chief selected the Supreme Court justices, and originally, senators were selected by state legislators. The authors of the Constitution were not the same authors of the first 10 amendments, and were opposed to the principles they represented. They were included only out of necessity, as the states refused to ratify the document for over a year, until the amendments were reluctantly agreed to by the founders, who then intentionally omitted any statutes that would provide enforcement of those laws. In fact, the burden of enforcing any violation of those rights was put upon the shoulders of the individual. This assured that only the wealthy, who could afford a legal battle between a citizen and the full power of the government, would have the means to compel the government to punish itself or to alter its conduct. The many years that have passed since the founding of our country has proved our greedy, selfish, lying founding fathers to be correct in assuming the stupidity of the masses. It is still widely believed today in America that the country was founded on principles of freedom, despite the overwhelming proof of the exact opposite.